Hello and welcome to Anxiety Hacks. I'm your host, Kate Hudson-Hall, and thank you everybody so much for listening. I'm an anxiety therapist and also an author. Now, my new book is out called Anxiety Hacks. And within the book, there is many different techniques that you can learn to help you to begin to break those difficult behaviors. So it's jam-packed full of lots of different tools and tips and techniques to help you to begin to learn about you and your anxiety and how you can, begin to start to address it, what you can do. So if you want to check it out, it is on Amazon. So you'll be able to find it there. So our guest now, our fabulous guest today. Oh, let me tell you, our guest is Shanenn Bryant. Now, Shanenn is an ACA survivor, an adult child of an alcoholic, and understands the behavioral challenges from growing up in a chaotic environment. After experiencing decades of jealousy in her own relationships, she decided enough was enough and set out to stop being drawn into bad relationships and ruining the good ones. Through much research and soul searching, Shanenn has tamed her jealousy and is now a certified life coach and a host of the Jealousy Junkie podcast, helping others relieve their own relationship with fears and anxiety. So Shanenn, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. So should we dive in? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about, what life was like growing up with an alcoholic parent and your anxiety, and must have been on overload, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, the anxiety was every day. It was constant anxiety. When you grow up in that type of environment, you're never sure what's going to happen day to day. And going to school and trying to learn multiplication and division when you have so much anxiety at home and carrying that anxiety to school makes it a very hard learning environment. And so a lot of people that come from that type of chaotic environment, they then carry that anxiety into their adulthood, because that's just what they're used to. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, in the bio, you talk about the relationships and my failed relationships. A lot of that stemmed from that anxiety, always worrying about either this is going to go away, like my dad, or I'm going to lose this person. And that's really when the jealousy sets in and that anxiety just keeps going. You keep carrying it, waiting for the other shoe to fall.
Yeah. And how did you deal with your anxiety? Once you began to be aware of that pattern, what did you
Mhm.
do to begin to change it?
There are a couple of things. Of course, um I went to therapy, tried therapy. Um, and it's kind of fun. Actually got kicked out of therapy, if that's a real I got
You got
invited
kicked out.
I was invited to not come back. And I think because I went into it thinking, I just need to feel better. I want to stop feeling the way that I do. And I want to stop having all these racing thoughts and knots in my stomach all the time. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really putting in that work. I just wanted somebody to say,
Yeah.
do this, do that, and
Yeah.
not looking at what was really causing that anxiety to come up. Because forever I felt like my dad left when I was 12 and I didn't speak to him again until I was 25. And I thought it didn't affect me. I didn't realize how much that affected me in my adulthood growing up that way,
Yeah.
because I thought, he hasn't been here for all the big milestones in my life. I don't need him. It doesn't affect me. And so I don't need to go back and do any of that me work, as we call it. So just tell me what to do to feel better.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then what was the turning point for you to actually realize, oh, I think there are things to address here?
hmm So I found what is called the laundry list. The last therapist I went to as I was leaving, the one that I was invited not to come back, the great thing that happened was she handed me the laundry list, which is, like these 15 behavioral characteristics of a child who grew up in an alcoholic family. When you go through, and I was like, okay, check, 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 check. Okay, I have pretty much all of these. And that was really a turning point for me to go, okay, wait a second. If there's a list, that means there are solutions for this. There are what I'm experiencing, someone else has experienced, and there are ways to overcome that. So that was really the start of my
Right.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bet that
And
was a real
then
revelation to think, gosh, other people have moved on. It means that I can move on.
right. Yes, because forever I just thought that's the way that I'm wired. I'm
Mm.
wired this way. I'm always going to just be an anxious person. I'm always going to have jealousy in my relationship. I'm always going to be fearful and waiting for the other shoe to fall. So to see it on paper and to see, oh, there are people who are overcoming this, and I need to figure out how they're doing it. And so I really started to do a lot of research and going back to go, okay, what are some of the exercises or tools that I was provided that I just didn't do before, and started to do those.
And what were they?
There's one really great one that I love. It was extremely eye-opening for me, and I don't know if this is the proper name for it, but the lifeline exercise. So it's really simple to do, but you just take a piece of paper, turn it horizontal, draw a line in the center, write high on the top left, low on the bottom left, and then starting from your first memory, writing down and kind of putting a hash mark of all of those experiences, things that happened in your life that were um, memorable or that made an impression or that you felt stood out to you. And it's such an eye-opening experience to go when you start connecting the dots and going, this was at a really high, and then here were all these things that happened. Well, of course I would feel that way. Or of course that makes sense that then I would carry that into my adulthood.
Yeah.
So that's just one
So
exercise
then
that I think
you could see the pattern of the same
yes.
behavior in
hmm
your adulthood.
hmm Yes. And what's really interesting about it, because one of the things that I noticed was every time something good would happen, there would be something kind of a fallout to that. And that was what I carried of thinking, well, I don't want to get too excited about this. I can't be happy because I know something is around the corner looming for me. So it really forced me to go back and go, is that true? Or I'm just remembering, those things that are standing out to me. So what
Mm.
else is true? Are there other things that happened during that time that weren't negative? And of course, there were. It's just what's standing out in your mind. And so I had to go back and go, there were so many great things that were happening. Yes, this one negative thing happened, but there were so many other amazing things that also happened.
Mm. Mm. And so I suppose, the anxiety was interwoven throughout your life, really.
Yes. And the interesting part, I think, where it really affects relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship with friends, family, is it almost becomes uncomfortable without the anxiety, without the chaos, because you're
Absolutely.
so
It's kind of
used to.
scary without it for some people because they don't know
Yes,
how to live their lives. Yeah.
yes, because you are always in kind of that fight or flight mode and protection mode when you are anxious and in that environment, that's what you're comfortable with, and that's what you think life is like and should be. So when I say I ruined many good relationships, a lot of times it was because, well, this feels weird and unnatural and boring and
Yeah.
uncomfortable because there's no chaos.
Yeah. Very interesting. Interesting. So, so now you're a life coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And so, well, what other ways helped you with your anxiety back then?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that really stands out to me, we do a lot of um, bringing in information outside of data. So a lot of the anxiety we tend to cause ourselves, where instead of just looking at the data, we start needing to connect dots and, okay, this one thing happened. Well, what does that mean? And so we start to fill in that information, whether it be my my partner turned their phone face down. What does that mean? And starting to go into all of these possibilities that it could be. That's really where the anxiety comes in. Typically, if we just focused on the data and what we know and ask questions based on trying to gather data, the information is where we get caught up in the created information. And so really taking the time to go, hang on just a second. Is this actual data that I know, or am I creating stories around this? And so taking that time to really
Mm.
differentiate the two makes a huge difference, because then you also, if you need more information or you feel like you need more data, you will approach your questions differently, instead of, again, trying to accuse someone of something or creating an unhealthy situation. If you're looking for just data, you can focus on that.
Mm. Mm. So how would somebody do that? How could they, begin to become more aware of that pattern?
Well, I think the first thing is really starting with how our emotions and what feelings we're having. I don't know if you've heard of him. There's a fantastic neuroscientist called Dr. Huberman. He has
Mm.
his own podcast, Huberman Lab. He talks about how, um, our feelings and emotions are temporary. Those will die down,
They're
but
like waves. Mm.
yes, but your behaviors and your actions, those will outlast you. And when you look at it in terms of, okay, I need to take a second and think through this, because we know that if you could get an email from someone that you thought, "Ugh, what do they mean by that?" Or someone may say something to you, make a comment, and your initial reaction is you're upset or you're angry or it makes you sad. We know that in a day, 3 days, 3 weeks, a year, those emotions aren't as strong as they are in the moment. So if you can remind yourself that this emotion is not going to feel this same way in the future, so
Mm.
how do I
Yeah.
want my behaviors then to be represented? So I think certainly taking that time to remind yourself of that, and then tailor your behavior, your actions, your questioning, whatever that is, to understanding that even if it's something that you should be upset about, or that is, founded, we know that we're still not going to feel that same way over time, but our behaviors, those are going to stick around. There are consequences to those.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. So it's recognizing that those thoughts and feelings will will come and go,
Hmm.
and they will reduce down and
Yeah.
change. And then recognizing, the behavior and starting to look from the outside in and
Hmm.
begin to change the behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really coming from a sort of a 360 view when you're trying to make those changes and really trying to do some um, self development. because we're so in the weeds or, in the trees that we can't see that forest. And we've heard that saying, but it does when you can kind of step back and go, I'm going to look at this situation sort of from a 360 approach. What's the data? What information do I have? I know that I'm really upset right now. That feeling's not going to last. So what other data do I need? And how do I want to respond?
Yes. Yeah. And have you got an example for us?
Oh goodness. Let me think of, well, one, going back to someone who's has unfounded jealousy in their relationship. There may be a situation where their partner, they see an email from a coworker, and instantly you're anxious because if you're an extreme jealous person, like the people that I work with, alone, just having any type of communication or contact, sometimes with the opposite sex,
Mm.
is going to send you into that anxiety spiral and being worried about it. And so it is, what does the email say? And we can go down even the path of, well, why'd they put that emoji? And why did they use a smiley face? And why
Yeah.
was it necessary to respond that way? So again, it's what does it read? What is the information? And if you feel like I need more information about this person, that's when you're really going to have to take that moment to go, I'm feeling upset about it right now. This is my anxiety. This is because, maybe in someone's situation, that's the way that they grew up. This anxiety is there. Does it need to be there? And is that serving me today? Do I need to be in that protection mode right now? So taking that moment again to go, well, what's the information? Exactly what does it say? And then you can ask your follow-up questions based on trying to get more data, not with your emotions, because that
Yes.
usually will lead to potential
Yes.
argument. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Very interesting. So so you work with people with anxiety, with jealousy,
Mhm.
and then you also have a podcast, Jealousy Junkie podcast.
Yeah. Yes.
So tell us about that.
Yes. So I mostly work with people who have unfounded jealousy, meaning nothing's really happened in their current relationship, but for some reason, they're constantly anxious and fearful in that relationship. And jealousy is always about either the past or the future. It's never about the present. So
Yeah.
meaning we are either operating because of something that happened in the past. So it could be the way that you were raised. In my case, my dad left, and it felt like, well, if my own dad doesn't love me, why would I be worthy of anyone else loving me? So I was
Mm.
always afraid that that person was going to leave me, that I was going to be abandoned.
Yeah.
Um so it could be something from your past growing up in that situation, or it could be that you've had relationships with infidelity or a series of relationships with
Mm.
infidelity, and
Mm.
you're bringing that into your current relationship because you're trying to protect your future, right? We're protecting our heart, protecting what's going to happen in the future. So it's never really about the present, but we can get really wrapped up and all of our energy focused on our partner and that anxiety that we're feeling. And it's really hard if we don't have some of the tools and techniques that we talked about to get out of that anxiety loop. And one of the things that I share with people that I work with is we've all heard to do breathing techniques to slow down our nervous system to kind of make that correction. And there you can Google a ton of different breathing techniques. But the thing that where we struggle is not practicing them outside of a dire situation. So it's just like CPR. We probably all learned or took a class at some point on how to do CPR. But if I haven't done it since 7th grade health class and you asked me in an emergency situation to do it right now, I'm going to struggle. And it's not working. I don't know exactly how to do it. I kind of
Mhm.
know what I'm supposed to do, but it's not working. So I think when you're in that situation and you're feeling that anxiety, it's stepping away, doing some breathing exercises. But the important part is to practice them before you need them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's such a, such a good metaphor for, we don't practice them unless we need them.
Yeah.
And, we may not do it correctly. We may not have practiced it for a good few weeks, and then we've forgotten the specific steps of how to make it most beneficial for our bodies.
Yes. And are we, when you're in a emergency situation or your nervous system, you have that anxiety going on, it's really hard to think clearly.
Mm.
So if it's not almost a habit for you that's going to come naturally in an emergency situation, it's probably not going to work for you. And so I think where people get caught up when they're trying to work with their anxiety using breathing techniques is they're not doing it outside of that desperate situation so that their body just instantly knows this is
Yeah.
how to do it. And I'm kind of doing it on command when I am in a desperate situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it
Yeah.
becomes by practicing it when you're not in that difficult situation, whatever it may be, then by practicing it when you're not in that situation, then it becomes an everyday sort of like pattern. It's an anchor to your breathing, so you can easily kind of hook into it and be able to
Hmm.
attune to it and
Yes.
immediately gain the benefits.
Yes. Because jealousy sufferers and people with anxiety, and that moment comes on very quickly.
Yeah.
So it's going to come pretty quickly, and all of those emotions are boiling up. And so, as you said, which was a great way to say it, if you can't hook into it very quickly, then it's not probably going to work for you. And then that's sometimes where people give up and say, I can't get over um, feeling anxious. I can't get over feeling jealous in my relationship because nothing's working for me.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And in my book, Anxiety Hacks, I talk specifically how to practice the breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds and you hold it for as long as you can, and then breathing out for 8. And the specific reasons why you need to do it, and work with your breathing like that, to be able to
Oh,
work with your nervous system and to be able to access your parasympathetic nervous system, that calm, normal, relaxed nervous system.
yes. Well, and think about that. I mean, if you tried, breathing out for 8 seconds, actually, that feels like kind of a long time for the first few times you're doing it. So, even in that example, yes, of that breathing technique, wonderful breathing technique. So you need to kind of practice that, like, breathing out for 8 seconds until it becomes really natural for you.
Yes. Yeah. And how else would you suggest people, and what else could they do to begin to, work with their anxiety and help themselves?
Um, I mean, I think, you know, using the one thing, and we've been talking about it a little bit, is that practicing, not mastering, or practicing piece of it. And I talk about it all the time. But if we're going into situations, especially people with anxiety and how we have our racing thoughts and our mind is kind of all over the place, if we go into that situation thinking, well, I'm going to try this approach, or I'm not going to be this way the next time, or I need to tame my anxiety, and we try a technique, we try one of the things that we've discussed today, and it doesn't work, then we tend to give up and we tend to think it doesn't work and that we're doomed to be that way. So, going into it with the practicing, not mastering approach, I'm just practicing right now. I may not be good at meditation for 3 months. It may take me a while, but I'm going to, I'm just practicing. So if I fail, you can't fail at practicing, right? So,
Yeah,
but if you're
absolutely.
trying to
Yeah.
master, then it becomes a frustrating situation and people tend to give up. So I think that's my kind of number one in in working with anxiety is just keeping that mindset of practicing, not mastering.
Yeah, that's such a pivotal point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now so you work with people with jealousy and their difficulties around that area and their anxiety. And if people wanted to get in contact with you, Shanenn, how would they do that?
Yes. So, as you mentioned, my podcast is called Jealousy Junkie. There's some amazing topics on there. And if they wanted to reach me, I'm on Instagram at Jealousy Junkie Coach, or my website is just jealousyjunkie.com.
Okay. And so do you work with people online?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yes. Yes. We've got, I have coaching clients that I work with. And then right now I'm beta testing a new program called Dump the Junk. So I'm super excited. That'll be
Mm.
coming out soon, but that's in beta test right now. So yeah.
So what is that? What is that, a course or something?
Yes. Yep. It's a 6-week course. Yep.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. And I'll be talking about that on the podcast as well.
And when do you plan for that to be sort of released to the world?
Yeah. So that program will come out the beginning of February.
Oh, okay. So
2020.
people can keep checking on your website, and then you'll have all the details there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, fabulous. And so they work on it on their own at home.
Yes. Yes. And then there's a coaching session that they'll come to. So we can talk through the exercises that they worked through on their own and kind of help them if there's anything that they're stuck in or trying to have a breakthrough on. So yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So that's very
Yeah.
exciting, isn't it?
It's super exciting. Can't
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah. Oh, well, Shanenn, thank you so much for sharing your time and all of this amazing knowledge. Because, it sounds like you've had a very difficult time throughout your life. And now look at you, you've learned so much and you're helping so many people, which is incredible.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Shanenn. So that's all for today's episode of Anxiety Hacks. So thank you to everybody for listening. And before we go, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes or wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And of course, let us know what you think of the show and show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. So thank you to everybody for listening, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.